Yeah.
Welcome everybody to
Oh, wow.
the Unready Room.
I really wasn't. I was looking at the chat and I had no freaking idea that time. Very
Yeah.
funny.
Unready as always, of course. The Unready Room with Dan and Brandi and all of the fine, fun people in the chat. So, Brandi, how are you today?
You know what? I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I feel like I should have worn the green captain's wraparound because it's a comedy episode. That's what we break out during the comedy episodes, right? So,
Yeah, and we can also always count on great Pike facial expressions during a comedy
oh
episode.
my God. Okay, yeah, we'll get into this, but this episode, we're talking about the episode Charades, by the way. The background, if you haven't watched it twice, watch it a second time and just keep your eye on Pike through the whole episode. It is the funniest thing. Like, I need to go back and rewatch this scene again because might be something but I missed, but somebody was telling me that with the scene with Spock and Amanda in the transporter room, once he takes off the hat and it gets awkward, you just see the door open and close behind Spock.
Yep. Yep.
It's just like, nope.
Not staying for this.
So great. Oh man. And then during the dinner, oh man, we'll get to it. Oh,
Just so many things. I've watched it 3 times now, and I wanted to squeeze in a 4th, but I didn't have time.
mhm,
And I will probably watch this about 100 times in
mhm,
the
mhm.
coming days and months.
Oh my
I
goodness.
I had been waiting 50 days to talk about this. 50 days.
I waited a little longer once we got the screeners to actually watch this episode. So it was only a couple weeks ago that I watched it, but yeah, even that couple of weeks was tough because there's a lot to talk about in this episode. And I recently, I shouldn't do this, but I recently got into it a little bit on this discussion on one of the fan pages or whatever, about how some Yahoo who I don't really care about figures they're writing Spock badly and Spock's acting out of character. And I'm like, oh, just you wait, because this episode is so much fun and I love it, but it's going to make that guy's head explode. And I'm kind of here for it. I'm okay.
Mhm. Yeah, I was waiting for that too. I guess I just have really curated my social media to the point where I don't see
Mhm.
those asshats. So
Yeah. I don't see them often, but every once in a while a post comes up, and the heartening thing about them is like when those posts come up, it's usually filled with comments of people pointing out why they're not correct in what they're saying, and I saw this thread early and I got in early and added my voice to it. So
yeah.
and I don't know how many likes the actual post had, but my reply had 106 likes at one point. So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then when they get proven wrong, they just move the goalposts like they
Mm-hmm.
do because they can't
Mm-hmm.
possibly accept their own failings and instead have to project them onto others,
Yeah.
which maybe they ought to take some time and work on themselves instead.
Yeah. But we're watching Strange New Worlds, and I'm going to be completely honest, even if there wasn't precedent for how the Spock character is being written and stuff, I don't really want to watch a show that just rehashes characterizations we've gotten for 50 years. I
Mhm.
they're make like A, they're making a TV show, and B, they're making an interesting TV show that does interesting things. And as much as we Star Trek fans, like Uber fans, sometimes don't like to admit this, the show's not made for us either. It's
Yeah.
made to appeal to a wide audience and to get people to watch it. So if you're just going to like do everything the same that's been done for 55 years and nothing new, and you have to adhere to these strictures of blah blah, it's not going to be interesting. And what they're doing is they're telling interesting stories about really cool characters, and they are managing to make it work in canon, in my opinion. So yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. Because there are still stories to tell in these little pockets that haven't been explored. And so why
Hmm.
not fill them out? Why not add it to the giant, massive mural that is Star Trek, which has room for everything.
Absolutely. And I will say, like, as a huge Star Trek fan, I've watched all of Star Trek. I am intimately familiar with every corner of Star Trek. And after watching this episode the second time with my wife, Nikki, I went to Netflix because Star Trek is still on Netflix here in Canada. And I loaded up the original series and I watched the bit of the naked time where Spock's losing control of his emotions and Chapel has just infected him with the thing. That conversation works with this episode. And not only that, there are layers added to that conversation because of this episode. They're not violating anything, they're adding and making things more interesting. This version of Chapel is way more interesting than the unrequited crush on the weird alien that the original series gave us. Giving them this history here, it works so well, and they've watched those and they've been very careful, I think, to make it all fit, and it works brilliantly. So
Yeah, and I know Major wanted to do more with Chapel, but she was not allowed.
mhm,
So she
yeah,
did what she could, but she couldn't change the material she was given.
absolutely. Well, let's stop talking in generalities about this episode and get into it because this is a really fun one. So first of all, like I said, thank you to everyone joining us live, and thank you to everyone who's watching this later. We really appreciate you as well. Um, Shout out to what's happening right now in Grand Prairie. I don't know how many Grand Prairie viewers we have other than me and Matthew, who's also from Grand Prairie, who is currently at Grand Con right now. That's the big convention happening and doing cosplay and stuff. And he wanted me to shout out his cosplay page on Facebook. So I am doing that. I just put a link in the comments. Facebook.com/Bema Saberwin is his personal cosplay page. You guys should all go check that out. He's showing the costumes he's wearing this weekend and stuff. Star Trek and otherwise. I think today he's like a mashup of Luigi and a Ghostbuster. Cool.
Which is funny because Luigi's Mansion.
Yes, totally. But yeah, I thought
I'm sorry, give me a second because
oh, it's all good. Yeah, no, I figured I'd shout that out just because he's usually with us here every week. He's a very loyal
yes.
viewer, and unfortunately, he can't make it, but I'm sure he'll be watching later. Hey, Matthew.
Hi, Matthew. I'm gonna have to look at his pictures because I gotta see that cosplay.
For sure. Oh, well, so this episode, we're in the Vulcan system. And this is interesting. There's a survey of this moon of Kirkov on the far edge of the sector, so kind of near Vulcan, which is kind of cool. It feels like close to home, but still new discoveries to be made and stuff. And this ancient Kirkovian civilization. Interesting that Kirkovian. I kind of kept hearing it's like interesting choice. I wonder who that's named after. I didn't look that up myself, but
I didn't either, but I know it's not Jim Kirk because it's
no.
spelled differently.
Yeah, it's Kerkhovian.
So there must be a Kirkov out there that we don't know. The name sounds familiar now that I
does,
say
doesn't
it,
it?
Kirkov. Someone in the chat, look that up for us, okay?
Mhm. And while this is happening, there's some downtime on the ship and stuff. And Nurse Chapel is taking time to prepare for this fellowship that was mentioned in a previous episode on archaeological medicine. And a little shout out here, which I find interesting. They're quizzing Chapel, her coworkers are quizzing her on Corby's 3 principles of archaeological medicine. Now, I'm assuming that's Dr. Roger Corby, who at this point is not yet Chapel's fiance. So, a little nugget dropped there, interestingly.
I didn't catch that. Thank you.
They just say Corby's 3 principles of archaeological medicine. And I mean, makes sense. He was an archaeologist and all that stuff. The original series episode, What Are Little Girls Made Of, is where we get all the details on that. So interesting. I originally thought when this internship was mentioned earlier in the season, I thought that would be the way that she's going to meet this guy. But given the events of this episode, I'm thinking, and jumping around the episode, I'm thinking this paper she publishes makes her a big name in archaeological medicine, and Dr. Roger Corby is going to search her out as an expert in the field, which that's kind of cool. That's interesting. That's my guess. I have no idea, but
I like it. I like that. Excellent theory.
Yeah. Yeah, and DJ Kid, exactly. I think Corby will read her paper for sure. So,
Well, considering it's about archaeological medicine. So, in an ancient medical practice that she convinced an interdimensional species that no one had interacted with in hundreds of years to help her with.
Absolutely. Oh, that's where I saw him before. Okay, I haven't looked up the actors or anything in the episode. Nikki recognized T'Pring's mom, as she was in something that she had seen before. But I was like, oh, the father's familiar. I hadn't looked him up. But yeah, he played Arjun, Avasarala's husband, the second iteration of him in the series. I knew I'd seen him somewhere. That's awesome.
Interesting, because that character was so different that I didn't make that connection.
Yeah.
So well done, guy who
Very
played
cool.
Arjun and Savette. Well done indeed.
And we will we have things to say about Savette.
Oh, we do.
Because spoiler alert, I agree. Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool. Okay, so yeah, that's what's going on with Chapel. Plus, of course, there's this exploration of the Kirkovian anomaly, which that's going to end up being Spock and Chapel who go on that mission. Interesting. I'm sure it'll go all according to plan and everything will be fine.
I'm totally sure that it was absolutely going to be fine. And wasn't Spock supposed to go alone, but then he got, M'Benga said that he had a passenger, now had a passenger. And I thought, oh boy, we all know who that passenger is, especially since things have been super awkward with Spock basically reverting back to emotionless, except he's really not.
Yeah.
He's just, got a lid on it for now. And like the scene in the turbo lift where she's just awkwardly giving him side eye and he's just blandly staring straight ahead.
And but when Chapel, and this is later in the shuttlecraft, I guess, but when Chapel isn't looking, the nervous glances by Spock at Chapel.
Oh yeah,
I love that.
So much side eye going on. Just
definitely,
just so awkward, because that's the thing. He doesn't have a lid on his feelings for Christine, and that is clear.
Definitely. Stephen Fothery, interesting point here. Tex Trekkie, for those who know from his YouTube channel. They got 2 years with Corby. The show is 2259, and in 2266 they say he's been out of contact for 5 years. So 2 years for him to meet Chapel, get engaged, then disappear. A whirlwind quick romance, maybe a rebound from something interesting.
Imagine that. Yeah, which is interesting considering her fear of commitment.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this story.
Me too.
They obviously have a plan. Name dropping Corby there, I'm just like, okay, they know what's going on. They know the score. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, Spock and Chapel are going to explore this anomaly, and there's it's a space-time, one of those things, a space-time thing. Star
Vortex
Trek
thingy, anomaly thing.
Yeah. And as they get closer, they're hit by gravitational radiation, and as Spock says, he's steering into the skid, and the skid is taking us into that. So not good. And it's very clear if you watch it a second time, you know what Spock's doing as he looks over at Chapel and then makes some adjustments. We find out, of course, later that's the moment that he's shifting the shields to protect Chapel. Because it's logical. She's more fragile. That's why. That's the only reason.
Yeah, that's absolutely the only reason. It was the logical choice.
Mm-hmm. Vulcans may be known to not lie, or they may have that reputation, but boy, do they ever lie to themselves more than anyone else, I think.
So much lying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Non-corporeal DMV aliens. That's great. That's wonderful. Oh.
Having had to renew my driver's license earlier this year.
Oh man.
Yeah, the guy taking the picture was definitely like that. Oh, yeah.
So yeah, they end up kind of there's the Star Trek white fade out, something bad happening. Spock wakes up in sickbay on the Enterprise, and he finds out that the shuttle was recovered in space right near the Enterprise, intact, and Chapel was fine, but Spock has something wrong with him, and the camera work is such that you don't see his face completely. Some features are obscured, and this is, I mean, everybody knows what happens here, but this is my new favorite transition from the teaser to the opening credits. Spock's cut off F-bomb when he finds out he's been made human. The what the that was so good. That was
So funny.
great.
So funny. And of course, with us having the screeners, there are no previews or anything like that. So we had no idea what was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but when, he opened his eyes and basically we get the shot of 3 people hovering over him, I'm like, "Oh boy, something
What's
big.
going on? Yeah.
Something big is happening." And then the fact that they weren't showing his face completely, I thought, "Oh, I wonder." And then when he said something, I'm like, "Yes! This is gonna be fun."
Mm-hmm. That was wonderful. Um yeah, and that line. That's so perfect. Um I want to see the full take because
Mhm.
he actually said it and they just cut it off, right? So
Oh,
I
yeah.
want to see the full take.
Same. I wanna see all of the bloopers from this episode because I bet there are a lot.
Oh, I bet 100%. So yeah, Spock is human and he has to deal with all of this, and it's the episode. It's an out and out comedy, like
Mm,
last season's Spock Amok, right? This is hijinks.
yep. Yep, but there are some really heartwarming moments that also made
Hmm.
me tear up,
As
which
any
we'll
good
get
comedy
to.
should, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Totally agree with that, but yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, so it turns out that these Kirkovians, these non-corporeal life forms, fixed them, but Spock had what they called mixed instructions, and so they just used Chapel as a template and made them match. Um,
Which is great because when they go when Uhura finds that calling card and they go back to the Enterprise, or they go back to the bridge and, they call Yellow.
you called
"You
me?
called me?"
That was so good. And like Pike's reaction was so perfect. He was like, "Oh, yeah, like when you're on the phone, like, oh, yeah, yeah."
Basically, it was the customer satisfaction survey. That's what that device was.
Oh, there should have been some line like, "This communication may be monitored for training purposes," or something like that.
Oh,
Oh,
that would be great. That would be great.
mhm.
Ooh,
So yeah, they kind of cut like remediation has been made, and, there's no
no
further
further contact is
communication
required.
required, yeah, so, they cut the channel and Uhura can't get them back, so, um
Well, when an interdimensional species decides that they're done with talking to you, they really are done with talking to you.
mhm. So Spock's, might be stuck like this. We don't know. Well, I mean, we know, but we don't know. Um, but yeah, he's dealing with all these human emotions, and on top of that, there had been this plan in place for the Vishal engagement dinner, basically with the in-laws, I guess, and yeah. So, well, that's got to get canceled, right? We can't have that under these circumstances. But no, in perfect sitcom setup, nope, the dinner has to go forward. The mother-in-law is, insistent and it's got to get done. The boss is coming over for dinner scenario, right? Like we've seen this in a million sitcoms. And I mean, it's a silly setup, but it's aware that it's a silly setup. Like they're just like they're leaning into all of these tropes so hard that there's an element of self-awareness there that works, I think.
Yeah, well, and if they hadn't mentioned the Vishal dinner before the shuttle accident, what is with all the shuttle accidents, y'all? It seems like they're an inordinate amount rather, of shuttle accidents in Star Trek. But yeah, because Spock was talking about it before and saying, it is, as you humans say, a big deal.
Mhm.
So he was already worried about it, but now his anxiety has got to be off the charts.
Mhm. Um, so another thing I appreciated too was, this is before the whole accident as well that this is first mentioned. Humans have an odor, and Vulcans use nasal
So
suppressing agents.
suppressants.
In
I wonder where they got
Enterprise,
that.
yeah, in Enterprise, T'Pol called it her nasal numbing agent.
Hmm.
And they also mentioned, and I love this because in Enterprise, the line is Vulcan females are especially, sensitive to whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that'll come up somehow. And that is mentioned later too, that females are even more, attuned to that and can sense that. So I like that. I like that they're bringing in those elements.
I appreciated that too, because yeah, to
To Prill?
when the pill, I mean, sorry, to Prill, sorry, um, we'll just call her to pill. When to pill said that, I'm just like, oh, of course you would have to bring that up. But then I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's actually established in Enterprise because
Hmm.
she's a pill.
Yes, absolutely. Um, so one of Spock's initial concerns as a human, which I like, do I smell like a human?
Yeah, yeah. And how would he know? Because
Mhm.
if you're human, you have the scent glands of a human, the nasal capacity of a human. So how would you know? Because
Exactly, yeah.
that's just, humans.
Yeah.
It just be how that works. But yeah, I found that very amusing. And oh, and I thought there's all this stuff that goes on in the cold open about Spock using his downtime to pursue other things, and one of them was cooking, and I thought, cooking? Spock cooking.
Hmm.
Have we ever seen him cook?
I don't think so.
I don't either. I can't think of a time where. Spock and cooking were a thing, and I just thought that was very interesting that he would want to try cooking,
Mhm.
and I thought, "Well, how are you gonna do that when you can't smell things?"
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I went, What?"
Mhm.
Also, I find it funny that, Chapel considers preparing for an interview downtime. Yeah, she's driven.
Mhm. Definitely. Uh, sorry, I'm just looking through some, um, comments here. But, Tristan, I hope you're okay. Sorry. Alright. Okay. So, where were we? Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
sorry, yeah, he's freaking out because he can't do the Vishal dinner, doesn't
Yeah,
want to do
oh,
the Vishal dinner.
right. I remember the comment I was looking for now. One of the things that I was really wanting a few weeks ago, happens in this episode, which is the return of Mia Kirshner as Amanda. I'm so
Yes.
excited to see her anytime there's something from Discovery being brought in. That's awesome. But Mia Kirshner, especially, I loved her as Amanda, and I love that we get more of her here. So uh, Spock goes to meet his mother, um, wearing, I'm as the Canadian in the room, I'm going to say he's wearing a toque. That's what he's wearing.
He's wearing a toque, that's absolutely what I thought too. I mean, this is filmed in Canada, so of course it's a toque, come on.
Absolutely. And also, does not everybody want that toque now? I mean, come
I
on.
do!
It's gorgeous. I
It
love it.
is! It's the perfect color, and it's got that little Starfleet delta on the front of it, and I want it.
Mhm. It's like, "Why are you wearing that ridiculous hat?" "It's regulation, mother." "Oh, yeah, I have one just like it."
But his is probably gold to match his uniform.
Oh my goodness. Pike is he's so good in this. So yeah, that whole scene, a mother knows, right? I love that
Mhm.
scene. She's like, "No, we've got to have this dinner, blah blah blah." Um, his muscle spasms that Spock's having. They're muscle spasms.
So great. So great.
Oh, I was crying laughing in this episode and crying for other reasons during this episode as well. Um, it's just it's so much perfection.
Mm.
Spock contending with all of these emotions, smelling and tasting bacon for the first time, and oh man, I loved the setup of that it's sort of a montage, right? You get a little
Mhm.
glimpse of each situation, and the first one you're like, "Oh, I'm excited for Spock. He's getting more acceptance. He's experiencing new things." All this, he's I guess the thing with Kirk, there's no real positive about that at any point, but as each time it comes back to the situation, it gets like the second time is kind of funny, right? He's stuffing himself with bacon. He's getting kind of annoyed and saying something about Kirk. He's laughing really hard at the joke, and people are like, ah. And then the third time it comes back to each situation, it's dark, right? Like the overindulgence, the feeling
Mhm.
sick, the like losing it on Kirk, which is also funny, but kind of dark if you're in Kirk's position. And the like almost manic behavior, laughing at the joke and kind of scaring his crewmates a little bit. I really liked how they did that, how just each time they came back to it, it reframed the situation in a different way. It was really well done because you feel a lot of things as it goes through.
Oh, absolutely, and the minute that Spock took a bite of that bacon, I'm like, "Dude, you're a vegetarian! Do you know
Mhm.
what that's gonna do to your digestive system?" And
He's
when you
making up
just
for
keep
lost time, though.
Oh, absolutely, it just Ethan is so brilliant in these scenes. He's
Mhm.
brilliant anyway, but just I love that he gets to show this human Spock and he is so good at it.
Mhm.
He's basically, he has this conversation with La'an, and he's
Yeah.
talking about all the different things that he feels at the same time, and she talks about how, um, he's basically feeling, like a teenage boy going through puberty, which actually really explains a lot. And,
Totally.
yeah, and it's this mixture of anger, fear, sexual attraction, and hunger. Snacks, so many snacks, you're just eating all the time.
Mhm. And then, yeah, the self-awareness too, I really like, where he's not experiencing emotions for the first time. He's had Vulcan emotions and human emotions, kind of an amalgam of the two, but he's never had pure human emotions and all of this going through him. So where he's explaining to people what's going on and what he's feeling, I really like that. And when he starts to his eyes kind of wander over La'an, and he's very obviously feeling some things, and then immediate embarrassment, and he's like, and now I am very embarrassed. And La'an's like, it's okay, just need to work on impulse control. um that said, I couldn't help but think back a couple episodes to La'an peeking a little bit at Jim Kirk taking his shirt off and stuff.
Mhm.
Now, a more adult sensibility where she covers and isn't obvious about it, but I think there's some understanding from La'an there because she appreciates the human form as well, let's just say. So, and nothing
Yeah,
wrong with that.
yeah, I really liked, of all the people that he talked to about those things, it was La'an.
Mhm.
So, and I just loved how she was just frank with him. She was frank, she was
Yes.
honest, she was understanding because
Yeah.
she remembers what it was like to be a teenage female. So, yeah,
Mhm.
I loved that it was her that
Yeah,
was in that scene.
it's a fun dynamic, and it's not one we see very often, I don't think. So, well, I mean,
Mhm.
we never see human Spock interacting with other people at all, but
No.
that Spock La'an dynamic was interesting, and I kind of like that. And yeah, I think
Yeah.
it could have been any number of characters in that scene, but the choice of La'an, I think, was kind of inspired. I like that because it puts them both in a little bit of an ill at ease situation, because as she said, she's not a people person.
Mm.
So she's basically counseling him in this scene. And
Yeah.
I kind of like that. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, I
Oh,
think
as Cersei says, yeah. I never
yeah.
imagined Lon as a counselor. There you go.
Yeah. I think that, I wonder if it's because he knew she would give it to him straight
Hmm.
instead of dancing around the topic or the feelings, that she would just be honest and upfront with him.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he chose to talk to her.
Hmm. DJ Kitty Cat makes a good point too. She was probably called when he went off on Kirk, so maybe that's how they ended up in the room together. Where Lon's like, Spock,
Fair,
let's just go, and that's kind of cool. I like that. That makes sense.
fair. And also, totally, identify with him going off on Kirk. So, because
Yes.
yeah, and we were talking about that before the show, and, I was just like, "Who does that? Who comes to a meeting with the captain with a snack and a drink, eats during the meeting, leaves crumbs on the table and dirty dishes on the table during the who does that, Sam?"
Mhm.
So, yeah, I
Did
probably would have gotten to that point with him as well.
True. To be fair, we didn't see the end of the meeting, so maybe if he'd had the chance, he would have cleaned up after himself. Because even, like, before Spock was turned into a human, he cleaned it up before the meeting was over, so maybe.
Well, here's an idea. Eat your snack before you come to the meeting or after the meeting is over. Don't eat your snack during the meeting. It's disrespectful.
Fair. Fair enough. Yeah, Sam Kirk. I love how much Spock dislikes Sam Kirk given the, like, close friendship he's going to have with his brother. That's fun. I like that dynamic. That's,
Yeah, he
yeah.
didn't like him from the start.
No. Yeah.
Just I mean, just from the very first time that Sam Kirk was on the bridge in episode 1, season 1, and,
Mhm.
uh, basically Pike says, "Oh, yeah, hey, he's gonna be your boss," and the look Spock gives him is like, it could melt steel.
So, there's history before the series between the 2 of them, right? Like, that's the impression
It
I got in
seems
that
like it.
episode. Like,
Well
Kirk was a new crew member in that episode, but I feel like
mhm.
there was some kind of history there. Spe
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we know that he's a xenoanthropologist,
Mhm.
and guess who else was a xenoanthropologist? Michael Burnham.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe it's a little bit about that he doesn't
Interesting.
want to work with this other xenoanthropologist because that's what his sister was.
Mhm.
That's the only way that I can think that that beef might have started, unless S Sam did something else to him, but it didn't seem like they knew each other that well,
Hmm.
so I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just think it's funny that he just hates Sam.
They should keep referring to this like beef between Spock and Sam Kirk and never fully explain its origins, I think.
Yeah, I
That would
think
be
that's
fun.
fine. That's fine. I
Yeah.
can make up headcanon all day for that, it's all good.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So yeah, we see that like this Vishal dinner is going to have to go ahead. Amanda is going to do something that she should have done long ago. Acquaint Spock with his human side and teach him how to lie.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Now we know where he gets it. From his mom!
Yes. um, Amanda, I remember when Star Trek Discovery was first coming out, and we didn't know very much about it. But one of the things that either Brian Fuller or one of the other early writers for Discovery said was that they love the character of Amanda. And that was something they were going to do something with. And I love this character as well. I think
Mm,
there's a lot of really cool potential still to be explored with that character. And I think this episode does a lot more than even we've seen in other Amanda-centric story. Not Amanda, there hasn't been an Amanda-centric story, but stories involving that character. I think this one pushes it the furthest it's been. You finally get to see a bit of from her perspective. Like, what would it be like for a human woman to have married a Vulcan and live on Vulcan and raise a half Vulcan, half human son? I think that's an incredible potential for story there. And I love that we get a bit of that exploration here because that was tough. We always hear about how hard it was for Spock growing up, how embarrassed Sarek was sometimes by Spock and presumably by other Vulcans' opinions of Amanda. But from Amanda's perspective, like how much harder would that be? How much worse would that be? I love that we get it, even some exploration of that here.
agreed, because that was something that I've been thinking about since I was a child, because 'cause I'm a very sensitive person, and
Mhm,
as someone who grew up being bullied, and so, I kind of understand how that would make Spock feel, to be made to feel like an outsider with on your own planet,
mhm,
and I did think about, his mom a lot because, we knew she was human, and I thought, "Well, how does that work? That can't be easy for her," and
mhm,
that was just the thoughts of a child, and as an adult, when I had more perspective on life in general, that became a much deeper discussion in my brain about what would it really be like to be married to a Vulcan and living on Vulcan as a human, and what biases would be thrown at you literally every
Mhm.
single day of your existence.
Yeah. Like, there's something in this episode that is a bit of, not a callback, but it really reminded me of, Star Trek 2009, right? Where Spock is in front of the Science Council, and, he's going to be admitted to the Vulcan Science Academy or not, and they say, "Oh, you're admitted. And we're amazed at how well you've done despite your handicap." And he's like, "What handicap is that?" "You're a human mother, of course." And T'Pring says basically the same thing to Spock here after, again, we're jumping all over, but after the ceremony's all done and he has succeeded, she's like, I'm impressed given your handicap. And like she's saying, given that you're half human, but his mother's in the room and she's the reason he's half human. Like that felt pointed at her. And like earlier in that, right? And she's like, "Oh, there's an odor. We all know what that is." And
Mm,
it's Amanda that's in her peripheral vision when she says that. It's like, oh, I hated that. And when Spock speaks up for Amanda, and Amanda immediately starts getting teary-eyed, like almost as if saying like pinely,
mhm.
you know. And Spock admits like, "I've never realized before. I've never thought of this before, but how hard it must be for her and how well she's borne that condescension and that mistreatment by her peers and the people around her." um I got teary-eyed and like, that was incredible. I love that.
Yeah, it was beautiful, and it definitely made me well up, because the minute the pill started saying all that stuff to Spock, I'm just
Oh.
like, "Oh, honey, you should just kept your mouth shut. It's going down now. It's
Mhm.
going down." And this was after Spock had had the injection to make his Vulcan side come back, even though the physical attributes could take a couple of hours. Everything else worked immediately. So
Yep.
he was back to himself as far as personality at that point, and still he's just like, "Oh, hell no. You
Mhm.
did not just say that."
And I love that they did it that way. Like, the story could very easily have been written that in a fit of human, you know, peak, he could
Mhm.
have done that. But I love that they made the conscious choice to, nope, he's reverted back to his Vulcan self, mentally anyway. Some of the physical attributes took a little longer, but he was his Vulcan self, personality wise, control wise, all of that stuff. And he, in that moment, determined that it was logical to do what he did and to defend his mother, and that this was the right thing to do. The human, the all human Spock would have still been scared and said, like, we need to preserve this as much as possible and make it all go well. But the half Vulcan Spock realizes, no, this is unjust and this needs to be corrected right now. And I just love that so much.
Well, I'm not so sure that the human Spock wouldn't have gone off onto pill, because when
He
he
was
had to
close.
excuse himself to go to the bathroom and he's screaming into a towel.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, if she had done that, I think he would have just really lost it like any other human teenage boy would.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that was a possible outcome for sure too. But I love that it's, measured even Spock doing this, and yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, and of course, T'Pring going, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And he's just like, "Mm-mm, mm-mm. Nope, this shall not stand."
Yeah. This has to do with my mother right now, so if you'll
Yeah.
excuse me.
Oh, DJ Kitty Cat, what was her quote about the Vulcan bladder?
Oh, yeah.
"Vulcans should have a more resilient bladder, and I take great exception to that." That pissed me off so bad because I have very active kidneys. It has nothing to do with the bladder and everything to do with what's putting it in that bladder, and that's the kidneys. So
Mhm.
she was incorrect with a resilient bladder. It would have been the kidneys, for one thing. And also, who are you to judge?
I had the feeling that Tapril would be the butt of some rants tonight.
Mhm.
And I say rants because I think for me personally, there's more to come as well. But
Mhm.
let's take a quick pause on Spock to talk about Chapel because there's a lot
Yes.
going on with her in this episode as well. So first of all, she's been working at fixing this whole Spock issue, so much so that she forgets something important that Mbenga reminds her of, and that's her job interview, basically, or her interview to be part of this fellowship. And this scene really pissed me off too. This Vulcan, um, uh, yeah, she didn't recreate the syntax of the original and blah blah blah. And she's like, "Well, I didn't just want to repeat it." So, well, memorization, you have to memorize all of this, and like that's the only thing he looked at. And she's, what about my field work? And he's like, "Well, we'll give it a glance. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, we'll give it a glance." Um, yeah, that was awful.
Yeah, so basically they just want rote recitation,
Yeah.
regurgitation. That's all they care about. They don't care if there's actually any understanding behind that recitation, which putting it in the language that she did and not copying it word for word showed that she understood the material. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Vulcans sometimes. They
Mm-hmm.
can be such jerks.
Yep. Um, that's wonderful. Kurt rants. Excellent. Um, but yeah,
Wonderful.
this scene made me angry on a number of levels. A, because of like, I'm sure that a lot of that was she's a human, so we're probably not going to give her much consideration anyway. And also, I've had interviews that weren't that bad. That was way worse than any interview I've ever had, but I've had interviews where I absolutely felt like the person on the other side of the table was going through the motions. They'd already picked someone else, and I was just there wasting my time and wasting their time because they were not going to consider me. Um, and the first time that happened in my life was actually fairly recent in my life,
Mm,
and that it's infuriating. And it, yeah, and Chapel walking through the corridor after that, like I was already just like getting kind of heavy in the chest because of the feelings that she was feeling. And then she meets Spock in the corridor. And I love this scene so much. Vulcans can be such jerks.
mhm.
And she's just like, huh. I never thought I'd hear you say that. And the hug and all of that stuff. That's a wonderful, wonderful scene between those two.
Yeah, it's funny because he goes in for the hug, and she doesn't respond at first, and then she's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna respond." And then, she's asking him how the feeling is going, and he talks about how, "I don't always cry in the shower." "Just kidding," and then he hits her, he slugs her in the arm. I'm like, "Oh, you're not kidding, bud. You are
No,
not
no,
kidding."
that was a very awkward just kidding. Like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I
no,
said a
he
little
was
too much truth there. I'm kidding."
Yep. Yeah, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I've
Oh,
cried in the shower. I feel so much closer to Spock now.
my heart went out to both of them throughout this episode. It's so good.
Yes.
Um, my God, Ethan Peck and Jess Bush just kill it, right? Like
Mhm.
I can't imagine. Ah, they're so good. Um, I'm gonna be gushing a lot in this. That's yeah. Anyway, um,
Dude, Spock is my favorite.
mhm.
So, yeah,
I
gush
couldn't
away.
tell. I couldn't tell.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not put up enough stuff? I mean, I gotta get more. I've got some more fan art in the works. They've got another
Mm.
commission coming soon.
Oh,
Just,
that's cool. That's excellent.
it's Spock with his lyre. So,
Ah, that's
yeah.
cool.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's all going on, and she's struggling to figure this all out, how to fix Spock. Nothing she's doing is working. Um, so she realizes the only people that can fix him are the ones that made him that way in the first place. So she talks to Uhura and Ortegas to talks them into taking a shuttle out to talk to the Kirkovians and try and figure that out. And more great uses of the volume and the that virtual set. There's
Mhm.
an actual photo of the three of them, like kind of all hugging each other from behind in that space, and that really sells what it's like to be in that virtual space. Like any other time, if you wanted to see a visual even coming close to that, it would be a bunch of people in front of a big green screen.
Mhm.
And this, like, it's reflected on the floor, it's all around them. They're actually seeing all these crazy colors and things appearing. How cool must that be to be able to act like that and not just on a green screen with, tennis balls on sticks that you're being told to look at and stuff. So cool.
It was actually quite nauseating.
That makes sense, actually. I
Yeah,
could see that.
because the floor was mirrors,
Yep.
and so they couldn't find a fixed point to keep their
Oh,
attention, so they kept getting dizzy and nauseated and falling over while they were filming those scenes,
interesting.
which took about 15 hours, according to
Mm.
Jess Bush.
Oh.
So, yeah, that was a challenge because there was no focal point for them. There was
Mm.
no fixed point that they could focus on and go, "Okay, I know where that is. I know that's X amount of feet away from me," etc. No, everything was constantly moving above them, below them, around them. And so
Oh,
that
okay.
was actually really, really hard on them.
I could imagine. Cause yeah, this still photo of them, just kind of the behind the scenes photo. It wasn't until I saw that photo that, like, and my wife can attest to this. I was looking at it on my phone. I was like, oh, the floor's a mirror. Oh, like that's how they did that. But yeah, now that you say that, that would be, I could see things coming up a little bit.
And honestly, they were probably hugging each other because that was the only stability they could
They were smiling for the camera, but maybe it was forced smiles.
Yeah, that was so challenging for them, just the way Jess Bush described it on the Ready Room. I just thought, "Oh, I couldn't have done that. I would have been falling over
Oh,
every other minute."
yeah.
So,
I
more
will
power
say,
to the ladies.
yeah, no kidding. I do hope that that picture or something like it, I hope they had professional photographers taking photos like that, because those sometimes show up on tables at signings and stuff. I would love that picture and get all three of them signing it. That would be
Oh,
so cool.
yeah. Absolutely.
No. Might bring up bad memories for them when they sign it, but
They made it through. They made it through. Oh, and
yeah.
another interesting thing is that that scene was filmed well after the rest of this
Hmm,
episode.
interesting.
And they had filmed other episodes since then, and then they went back and filmed this one. And I can't remember if it was because of the availability of somebody, or I can't remember,
Okay.
but I found that very interesting. And Will Wheaton asked her, "Was that difficult to get back into that mindset?" And she's like, "No, no, it's like it's a part of me now."
Hmm.
So she could just go right back to that particular time of the series and just slip right back into that mindset. And you know what? That's a good actor, man. That's a good
Yeah,
actor.
that's really cool. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about Uhura and Ortegas in this scene, because when Chapel is being interrogated, what is he to you? Oh, he's a friend. Oh, friends can't, you can't do this for a friend outside of the whatever period. There's not enough connection. And then they reveal the like, he shifted the shields. We're curious, why is that? What does he mean to you? And he's like, "Oh, well, I don't know. He's just a friend." We're in Ortega's, "Come on." Like, what? Just tell them you like Spock. God.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I don't think we mentioned is that this is kind of a ticking time bomb, because if they don't
Yes.
get this remedy for Spock, uh, within 24 hours, he will permanently be human.
Mhm.
So, scary.
Yeah. Which is interesting, and they play with this a little bit. Like, Chapel's in love with Spock as he was. But at the same time, and this comes across in how she plays it, if she let herself go there in her mind, she could have the Spock that she knows would return the feelings that she has for him in the way that, she might imagine. As she says, he's easier to talk to, and all this stuff. Um, and I think that's an interesting angle to this, that like there's probably some part of her brain, not a very selfish part of her brain, that would say like, well, darn, he's stuck like that forever. And I love that they play with that a little bit, but she's still going to go through with this because she's in love with Spock as he was, and also this is cruel to Spock what has happened to him, and she cares for him. And I think she knows that if he stayed human forever and she managed to get with him or whatever, it would be a lie, and it wouldn't be the true Spock, and it would, there'd always be that in the back of her mind, right? So I love what's probably going on in her mind, and what gets communicated in this episode. I think that's really cool. There's a lot of depth to that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that she considered that, but I never believed she would let him stay human,
No, of course not.
even if there weren't precedent with us knowing Spock's future.
Mhm.
um, I she wouldn't have, because that goes against her very nature.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, but there was that little bit, and I like that she admits it too. That she
Mhm.
says, he's easier to talk to. He's more like, blah blah blah, but that's not Spock. That's not the Spock that I like, and who she fell in love with, So, ah, I love it. And then that scene when he's in the bathroom, and the next thing to do is to perform the mind meld, which is the one thing that he was unable to kind of fake, right?
Mm.
Uh, and he's about to say the thing. Chapel zaps him on the
Mhm.
neck, says, "You better get in there." And oh, that was heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. She didn't wanna hear any words of affection from him
Mhm.
as a human, which is why she did it how she did it,
Yeah,
even though you can tell that it hurt her.
yeah. But it would probably hurt more in the long run to
Mm,
hear
oh,
those
yes.
things, and then still then have to do that, like,
Mhm.
oh, it's so
Well,
good.
and not only that, like, when she jams the hypo spray against his neck and Ethan's face just goes right back to Vulcan, it is masterful.
So good.
Masterful. That
Yeah.
guy's a genius.
Oh, it's excellent, and the pain on Chapel's face through all of that as well. So we'll come back to Spock and Chapel at the end, obviously, because, wha- but let's talk about this Vishal dinner. There's so much going on. There's so much that I love. First of all, that it's a dinner, and immediately T'Pril's like, "No, we're not eating the food." Ugh. I hate her
It
so much.
it was this has salt in it. And I'm like, Savette was really into it. I think Savette's a foodie.
Savette is such a joy in this episode, and there's some parts of it that my wife Nikki made a point, and I have to concede this. There's a little bit of the trope of the henpecked husband,
Mm,
that that she didn't really respond to at all, and I kind of agree. I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's kind of it's such a trope in sitcom-y type stuff, right?" Where, the husband is like, "Oh," and she's like, "No, you're oh, yeah, you're right, my dear," kind of thing. Um, where I think this excels past that a little bit is, like, we get that at the start, and it's still amusing. It's like, "Oh, yes, you're right, the food is subpar, I hadn't noticed, you're
mhm,
correct." But then at the end, like, he doesn't care anymore. Like, he's
mhm.
like, "Okay, screw it all. Do you have any more of that food?" Like
Yeah, just so great, so great. And, and I hate the term henpecked, I really
Mhm.
do, because it's very sexist. It's
Yeah.
basically
And that's what I meant, like, she
yeah,
like, that trope itself is sexist, and that's what
it is.
was responded to poorly.
Yeah, well, and the thing is that, um, Tapil is a dom. She's a dom, and
Mhm.
she needs a subservient. So and the thing is she's not born that way. That was learned behavior, so one can
Mhm.
only wonder what her mother was like.
Yeah.
And in fact, we even have T'Pring saying, "I can understand now why some species eat their young," which made Spock snort.
That was great. And she's like, "What?" I choked.
So great. So yeah, it's, definitely learned behavior, and it seems like T'Pring is trying to break the cycle. She's aware of it, and yet
Yeah.
she sometimes shows the same tendencies,
Mhm.
not to the degree that T'Pil does, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into this because I think that's a really important point because we what does T'Pring do later in Star Trek history?
Mhm.
Something that I think requires a great deal of lack of empathy and very much disregarding Spock's feelings and we're kind of getting a bit of backstory to that kind of helps explain a little bit of that, not just her background with T'Pril as her mother, but also she it looks like we're heading down the territory of her getting pretty wronged by Spock too. Like, let's be honest.
Mm.
So maybe a little bit more understanding of what she does in Amok Time, not excusing because it's still like and I know I'm using language that with regards to Vulcans, generally you would say, well, duh, heartless and
Mm.
seemingly cruel and not considering others' feelings. Again, Vulcans, duh. But, you know, I'm wondering if this family dynamic plays into that a bit as well. And maybe there's some of that intention from the writers as well, saying, well, look who she came from.
Mhm.
Her mother is capable of great cruelty. Does it not stand to reason that T'Pring would have an easier time adopting that sort of cruelty as well? And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, and T'Pring does, because Spock's saying what memory his mother showed him, and T'Pril's like, "It's mundane," and T'Pring's like, "Mother, it is illogical to argue about the nature of a memory." And
Mhm.
her mother is just like, "Mm." And I think though it there might have been just a teensy weensy little bit of, "Oh," in her at that
Mhm.
moment. Just going, "Oh, she can stand up to me." So
Mhm.
and the thing is, yeah, you can be 100% logical. That doesn't equal cruelty. That
No, yeah.
doesn't equal hatred. That doesn't give you the right to be cold and heartless either.
Yeah.
Because as we've seen Vulcans throughout Star Trek with a great deal of heart and
Yeah.
no cruelty. So that's just a to pill thing. So,
Yeah. And speaking of logic, I like that Savette is probably being eminently logical here, where, the human trope that I was mentioning earlier in sitcoms, from his perspective, is probably, I'll just let her be her and agree because it's logical. I don't want her to be fighting with me later, kind of thing.
mhm.
Um, it's logical from his perspective. And as Todd says, that guy would make a good diplomat. I
Mhm.
agree. Yeah. Stephen Fothery, by the way, I love this comment. Um, because you mostly just for the fact that you refer to Jim Kirk as Sam's brother.
Sam's brother.
I think that's the funny. I love that. That's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yeah, Sam's brother. So,
Sam's brother. Yeah.
which
Like
makes you think
if
oh,
you
sorry,
watch
go ahead.
if you watch all of Star Trek chronologically from Enterprise through now what we have, you meet Sam before you ever meet Jim. So
Mhm.
if you
This
don't
is
count
true.
time travel episodes, I guess.
Yeah, I will say that Sam's mustache is getting slightly better, but I still hate it.
I still hate it, but it's becoming a part of his character now.
It
I
has to be. It has to be
Yeah.
because of that stupid Operation Annihilation.
Yep. Yep.
Just which is an episode that scared me very much as a child, but anyway.
Mhm. Yeah. Until you watch the
Um
blooper of the one that lands on Spock's butt instead of his back. That's a great blooper. Wonderful.
I actually had nightmares about those
I
things.
believe it. I
When I
probably did too, actually.
yeah, and I can actually still see the visuals in my
Mhm.
mind from 40 plus years ago.
For me, it was when they showed the close up of them sitting there and they're like pulsating and they're making
Mhm,
that
mhm.
that noise. Like that's what that got me so bad as a kid. Oh, I did not like that.
And me was the thing that they could be hiding anywhere and just slide out
Oh,
and just attach themselves to you and sting you like that. It's just ooh,
ah,
freaked me the hell out.
yeah, for sure. Michael's brother and Sam's brother. Wonderful. I love it. Let's
Mhm.
let's make the trolls just so mad. I love it.
So angry.
Um, okay, so yeah, Civet we've talked about. To pill, I like that we've talked about. Um, let's go to the end. Well, not quite the end yet, because we've got a scene with T'Pring. Now, earlier in the episode, Spock was supposed to tell T'Pring what was going on so that she would kind of have a heads up and know. But over the course of that conversation, the way she was talking about her mother and how things are going, Spock kind of does what I think a lot of us in similar situations have kind of, you assess the mood of the other person, you realize, and you're like, well, I'm going to keep this thing from this person right now because yada yada yada. And that decision maybe comes back to bite Spock a little bit here, because T'Pring is very deeply insulted that Spock wouldn't include her in this knowledge of what had happened to him. And his reasoning is logical and that sort of thing, but her points are very logical as well. We have made this commitment to each other. We have literally shared katras. They switched bodies. They've agreed to share their lives together and not hide anything, and yet he kept this from her, and in her words, included nearly everybody else on the ship in this charade, huh? um, in order to, go through with this. And she's got a point. Like, in the moment, I absolutely see why Spock made the decision he did, but I absolutely see to Pring's point as well, that, like, how could you not be insulted to have your fiance keep this from you?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Does he love her? Does she love him? I
Hmm.
don't think so. I don't think so, either way.
Yeah.
Sure, I don't care what their physical relationship is like, they don't love each other,
Hmm.
because if they did, this wouldn't be so hard,
Mhm. Yeah.
but it's what's expected.
Yeah. I did wonder this as well throughout. I was gonna mention this earlier. I kept wondering how they were hiding Spock's human smell. Sorry, but,
No, that's
I
fine,
meant to mention it earlier and I forgot, but
well, T'Pring would know she's gonna come on board with a bunch of humans, she's absolutely gonna be on those nasal suppressants.
Mhm. That makes sense. Yeah. I guess the whole room, like, Pike was there, Amanda was there. It's just yeah.
Well, just getting from the transporter room to Pike's quarters, she'd have to go through a lot of humans.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. I accept that. They probably also put on, like, I don't know, Ode to Shirkar or something like if that's not a thing, it should be. Oh,
Oh, oh.
so, um, Spock and T'Pring decide to take a little time apart, and, um, Spock pretty quickly goes to visit Chapel, and, Chapel was on her way to see him, or was it the other way around? I can't remember.
He was about to go
Go
see her,
see
and
her,
she
and she's
coming
at his door, right.
to him. Yeah.
And, yeah, Spock says he wishes to explore these feelings that he has for another person. And yeah, we get a pretty passionate makeout between Chapel and Spock. And I love Jess Bush's delivery of, I don't know, shut up.
And it's just that first kiss too, man, she was caressing those ears. She likes the
Yes.
ears. Oh, she likes the ears. Yeah.
I like that touch. That was good. Uh,
Yeah, and, I would be willing to bet that, right, about that same time back on Vulcan, Ston is making a move.
hmm That's right, because yeah, we've already been introduced to Ston in this series too. He works with T'Pring with the rehabilitation people or
The
whatever.
prison.
So
Yeah, the
yeah,
prison.
the
Mhm.
the
The
prison.
detention facility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Interesting. Love quadrangle possibly at this point, but
Well, there's only one person in that well, 2 people really in that group that are actually probably feeling love because yeah,
mhm,
um, I don't know.
yeah.
Well, as Spock did say to Ston in, Amok Time, having is not so pleasing as wanting. So
That's interesting that Spock says that too. That's a lesson he's learned. I wonder if the fallout from this relationship that he's striking up with Chapel, spoiler alert, we know it doesn't continue. We know it ends probably badly.
Mhm,
Having a thing is not so pleasing as wanting a thing.
mhm.
Interesting. Maybe this is where Spock learns that lesson definitively.
I think you might be right.
Interesting. Um, Man, I love these 2 though. They're so good. They have
They're so
such
good.
chemistry.
Again, they could have chemistry with anything or
Yes, they're that
anyone,
good.
but together, they're just fire.
Mhm. 100%. So, is there anything we haven't mentioned with this episode?
Um, it made me laugh and it made me cry because
Mhm.
when he says all those things to Pill about his mom, and even when they're in the transporter room and he's talking to her there,
Yeah.
and just, because at that point he's back to himself really, and he talks about the memory and how he didn't recognize, he asked why she shared that one. She said, "What was the first time that I saw you feel be accepted by the others?" And he says, "Yes, but now I realize that you were not."
Mhm.
And
Oh,
he
yeah.
apologizes for that. And it's just like, "Oh, you're wrecking me again. You're wrecking me twice in one episode, you guys."
Yeah.
Just so good.
So yeah, Pike in the episode. We should
Oh my
call
god.
him out again because yeah, like I said at the beginning, if you've only watched this episode once, watch it a second time and just watch
Mm,
Pike through the whole
mhm,
episode. The
mhm.
background acting that he's doing, the number of times he makes strategic withdrawals when things get awkward and he's just like,
Yeah. Just the facial expressions alone.
yep. The like walking
The
in with more hors d'oeuvres and he's like, whoa.
Yeah, that was my favorite thing because Savette asks if they have any more of the food, and he's like, and he's getting up to get it. He's got the tray. Spock takes his ears off, and he's just like he just veers, just like, oh no,
Oh,
just I'm not gonna be a part of this.
so good. Oh man. Um, yeah. He's there's so much to love in this episode. There's not one part in it that I don't love, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, we should also mention Chapel talking with the Vulcan in the interview the second
Mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm.
where I just love where he's like, we've decided not to move forward with you.
If you want
Um,
to apply again, you can later.
if you feel that's a worthy use of your time or whatever he says. Ugh. And she's like, actually, I made contact through a space-time anomaly with a long dead civilization today, and they taught me a new archaeological medicine from centuries ago, and it was wonderful. And he's like, oh, really? Tell me more. And she's like, you can read about it in my paper that I'm going to publish later. um, I don't think your internship is ready for me. And
Mm-hmm.
cuts off, and his face, like he's like, and the cuts off. That was wonderful. I hated
Yeah.
that guy so much. So I
Yeah.
mean, you're supposed to, obviously, but
Obviously, because Vulcans can be such jerks.
yes.
You really, really can. Oy. And
Yeah.
I have to keep reminding myself, yes, this is original series Vulcans, and there is some progression
Hmm.
throughout, future iterations of Star Trek. But yeah, oof, a lot of times you just have to really not want to punch a Vulcan in the face.
Yeah, definitely. Well, final thoughts for Charades, and a rating, and that goes for both you, Randy, and of course the fine folks in the chat as well.
Yes. Um, I obviously adore this episode, and I'm going to watch it a million times because Jess Bush and Ethan Peck are so perfect in it, and we get so much of them during this episode, and I really just appreciate that. And I love that Ethan got this chance to shine and show he's good at comedy. He can do it all, you guys. Comedy is way harder than drama.
Mhm.
So, because there's a timing thing, there's a delivery thing, and it's not something that can necessarily be learned. It's just you just have to have an intuition about it, and he's got it, and obviously she's got it, and also very good at drama. They're wonderful together. Pike, again, just being beautiful background throughout this entire episode. And I am going to rewatch it a million times, like I said, but I'm going to definitely do the Pike only rewatch where I'm just watching him. So I will give this episode one scalding hot teapot.
Oof. That was visceral. You felt that. That was
I did. I did feel it. It made me hurt.
mhm. And Amanda, just and you hear the sizzle, right? And
Hmm.
oh, and Spock after he's done it and T'Pring squeezes his hand.
And he's
It's
like,
like
he's trying not to whimper.
oh,
Poor
yeah.
baby.
I loved this episode. It was so much fun. I yeah, Jess Bush and Ethan Peck on screen, like you say, they're amazing, but their chemistry together is just explosive. And this is someone like, I also think Gia Sandu and Ethan Peck on screen together are wonderful as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Regardless of what they're trying to portray, like the awkwardness and the like shame in that final scene of the two of them together, I felt that as well. Like, I love their chemistry when they're, lovey-dovey, but when they're with this, they're just such good actors. Like, that was
Mhm.
wonderful to see as well. Pike's background acting, like, it's just so much fun. There's so much to love in this episode. Um, so I mean, I have to give it a whole rainbow of DMV colored non-corporeal life forms. There we go. Yeah, it was wonderful. So, oh, it's supposed to be a dinner and they never ate the food. That still bugs me. Like, I'm still annoyed at her because it's the Vishal ceremonial dinner. Like, Pike made all that food.
You know
Yeah,
what? You know
jerk.
what? I'm gonna headcanon this for you right now, okay? Because Pike knew that Savette wanted that food. And so while Spock's having his little revelation and he veers away, he's making a doggy bag for
I
Savette that
I
he's
was
just gonna
gonna
pass
say
to him on the way out.
Starfleet issue Tupperware of all of
Yep.
that stuff.
Mhm.
Totally. Yep.
Yep. Just gonna box that up for him.
Yep. 100%. And if he had time, he even made like the little foil swan.
Oh, of course. Of course. He would origami the heck out of that foil. Yeah.
Definitely. Oh man. Yeah, this I remember when they released just the titles of the episodes and I saw this one was called Charades. And I was like, even if it's just an hour of a bunch of characters standing around playing charades from this cast, I would love it. Uh,
Mhm.
this episode was wonderful, and they even do get in a bit of charades, almost sort of. So that was great as well. A sacred word?
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. And if I were to say that this has 2 sacred syllables, then sounds like ear.
No.
And his face just ugh.
Oh my god. Also, when like they're trying to yes and each other basically,
Yes.
and like a sacred human ritual, and Amanda's like, yes, a very important human ritual called, and Pike's like, charades, and Amanda's like, and he's like,
Oh, I'm gonna watch this so many
oh, it's
times.
so good. Like,
So many
seriously,
times.
I don't know,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Oh man. How many syllables is that human using? I am the human.
Yeah,
Oh.
nice job on the ears. I know that, in some scenes, they had to switch back and forth really quickly between
Mm.
ears and no ears, and so they were only really loosely applied, and I think at one point, they weren't even glued on at all,
Oh, wow.
and so and I never noticed, so well done, guy who
Mhm.
did the ears. Well
Definitely.
done.
I had a thought that, like, in sick bay when he's handed those prosthetic ears, like I love that they probably just went to the makeup people and said, "We need a pair of ears that would you have in stock that we would actually use. Oh, here you go." And
Yeah.
we get to see those on screen. That's cool. I love that.
Yep, I knew those would be the actual ears, so they were a little more pink. A little more
Mhm.
pink because, you know, he doesn't have green blood anymore. He's fully human, so
Mhm.
a little more pink.
Oh, well, with that said, I guess we should bow out and declare this game of charades at an end. And we're going to be back. Oh, I actually, honestly, this time, I'm like, I have no idea when we're going to do this next week. I
We'll
should
figure it
show
out.
you my work schedule, Brandy. It's ridiculous. Um, but next week's episode is called Lost in Translation. Scarlett Johansson does not appear, but
No.
yeah, it has. Yeah, but we'll talk about it at some point. But until then, Brandi, where can folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandywine12. You can find me on Mastodon at Brandywine at ravenation.club. You can hear me on Boldly Go, a Star Trek Strange New Worlds podcast. And we haven't recorded the episode for this episode of Strange New Worlds yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. That's going to be a lot of fun. So have a totally different conversation with a totally different person, and still it's going to be fantastic. And yeah, those are the big things right now. So
Awesome. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Kurtrats, on Mastodon at Kurtrats at mstdn.ca, and of course the Positively Trek podcast, which took an impromptu week off because this week has been kind of crazy, but we will be back next week with a brand new episode. And until then, thank you all so much. Live long and prosper. And yeah, try and
remediation has been made.
remediation has been made. No further communication is necessary.